Keeping on the theme of money, revenue management, probably one of the most important things besides the owners of running a hotel business. And there is no one better out there to talk about revenue management than Melissa Kalan, founder of ARMA. Please welcome to the stage Melissa Kalan, ARMA, to talk about revenue management, distribution, rate parity, and what to expect in 2023. Please welcome Melissa. And the panel as well. I'll introduce them as well.
Come up, panel.
Come on. Anthony Stanley, Director of Performance Revenue Management for Choice Hotels, APAC. Kristy Edwards, Director of Revenue Optimisation, BWH Hotels. And Amit, Head of Sales, APAC, Pacific and Oceania, OTA Insights. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. And there was some great insights from, sorry, everyone, just one moment while we get organised. There was some great insights from that just prior panel, and certainly everybody up here loves hearing our leaders talk about upselling and attribute-based selling as well. So I think Adrian's mentioned, he put the headline of this panel, and I know he likes to do that to raise attention in the room with the rate parity discussion up there. So we'll tackle that in just a moment, but did you guys just want to, I know Adrian introduced you, but if you'd just like to say who you are and test your mics?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Anthony Stanley, Director of Performance and Revenue Management from Choice Hotels Asia-Pac. It's too long a title, I know. But looking after the operational side of our business as well as our revenue management and distribution functions.
Hi everyone, Kristy Edwards from BWH Hotels, Director of Revenue Optimisation for Australasia. Again, too long a title. Essentially similar role, looking after revenue and a lot of the operational aspects of our properties.
Hi everyone, it's Amit Peshawaria. I'm Head of Sales for Asia-Pacific with OTA Insight. Hardcore revenue and commercial background like Anthony and Kristy. So definitely understand the pain points. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we'll jump straight into it. I'm sure our panel of experts here today will give you a glimpse maybe into some opportunities where you may be able to go back and have a look at where you can drive greater asset optimisation. So we'll jump straight into the topic of rate parity first. It is talked at length in our industry and has been for some time. It does generate mixed views across our industry. Let's just, obviously, Adrian touched on it earlier as well, that really we want to be the same or better. We don't want to be higher, obviously, but it happens. It does happen out there through the fault of the property at times too. And we don't want the third parties in that to be lower. And we know that happens as well. So perhaps I'll just throw it over to yourself, guys, and maybe you can share with the audience what your view is on it and how you best manage it with your property groups.
Well, I guess, if I think about our own network, it's a controversial topic within our own network, let alone the industry. So we've done a lot of work in tightening up how our properties distribute, who they sell to, how they sell, and at what price. We use partners like OTA Insight to rate shop our hotels. But we've got, militant's probably the wrong word, but a lot more stringent about enforcing rate parity because we all know that the lowest cost of acquisition comes with a direct booking. And our brands stand for direct booking. Our website, our app is all about driving direct booking, and that's what franchisees want from us. So we've got to leverage our size to drive more business with that lower cost of acquisition for our franchisees. But we can only do that with both hands in front of us as opposed to one tied behind our back. So it's really important for us, especially when it comes to non-qualified stays.
Mm-hmm. How about yourself, Kristy?
Yeah, definitely. Over the years, it's something we've spent a lot of time on as a group, sort of ironing out all the structures to make sure that it's possible to maintain in majority rate parity, especially, making sure the brand and direct offering is, of course, the lowest. I think in terms of the relationships with the third parties and the OTAs, being very stringent at a group level, that those contracts are enforced and that they're not allowed to retail opaque rates and incorrectly mark up and everything, making sure that's reinforced for our hotels. That means that you need to spend less time on it on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, using tools like OTA Insight makes it a lot quicker and easier to do checks in terms of parity, and usually now we find, for the most part, unless you get the odd little rogue one that's just suddenly popped up, that if we're seeing large issues with parity, it's usually because something's happened with the connection. So that's sort of a trigger to go in and fix something, as opposed to it being a deliberate parity cause.
Yeah, and you touched on time, because that was a big issue a few years back now, just the amount of time that was needed to go through and keep a check on all the parity or disparity issues. And obviously there are some great solutions that can assist with that, and that time saving is massive. Yeah. Did you have any?
I just want to add here, so, whether it's rate parity or disparity, I think it's important to take a balanced approach. Rate parity was not so much of an issue during COVID, because we just wanted bums on bed and we wanted to fill the rooms as far as possible. We were very competitive from our pricing perspective. But now more and more, you can't do away with some of the online third-party channels. Yes, they charge an arm and a length as far as commission is concerned. So we, whether it's a global chains, whether it's regional, or even it's independent operators, I think we need to take a balanced approach to managing rate parity. At OTA Insight, we focus a lot of our resources on monitoring parity and disparity, and how can we support our clients in terms of compliance of rate parity. And we've seen some significant wins for those clients as well. But at the same time, as individual hoteliers, we also need to see what is the value that that specific OTA is bringing to us in terms of the commission cost, because they are your marketing channels. They're giving you the reach, they're giving you the visibility across where you wouldn't have otherwise invested as well. Direct is great and very clear advocate as far as direct bookings is concerned. In fact, data shows that your direct bookings increase by almost about 56% when you're almost at reaching 100% parity. So, but a balanced approach is really important as well. They are friendly enemies, if I can use that term.
And you touched on the channel cost, which is important for everybody to look at that for their own property, because if you're going to sit lower and then you're offering a discount, then there's loyalty benefits and things like that. You've got to really know when that starts to cut into your, that margin. And a lot of operators just don't know their channel costs, and so sometimes they're navigating blindly as well as to how they can kind of shift business. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, you do have some of the bigger operators who charge, your channel cost can be as high as about 25 to 30%. There are other operators who give you the reach and perhaps would be charging you less. But it's important to see the overall lifetime value of the channel. Are they also supporting you with giving you the business in your leaner periods where you actually need them more than just helping you to fill your rooms with room nights during the stronger seasons where normally you would get business coming in as well. So that's really critical as well.
I was just going to say, I think the other thing is, distribution is a real landmine kind of environment, or whack-a-mole environment. You talked about, we get these third parties that we've never heard of. It's probably some kid sitting in a garage who's created an OTA, and he's probably getting his inventory from hotel beds or someone like that, and all of a sudden he's undercutting. But the other part of that is it pulls into the GDS. So you don't want to capitalise, or cannibalise, I should say, what for us is at least a really high yielding channel. Yeah, it's high cost, but it becomes even more expensive if OTAs are being booked by your corporate customers on online booking tools. So that's again why I think parity is really important. And to your point before, Amit, COVID in some ways really allowed us to move the needle, in that OTAs weren't spending as much on SEO and Google hotel ads. So we actually found that our ratio of direct versus online improved because we were able to spend a lot more and get more bang for our buck in the online space as opposed to what we can do right now. And that needle has actually stayed there. It was a bit of, if you're going to try and pull a diamond out of the rough that was COVID, for us, that was a pretty big diamond to capture.
Absolutely. Adding to that, I'd agree. Also, I think we find that a lot of the third parties that are receiving this onward distribution quite often tend to be international operators, or they're cutting into that sort of wholesale inbound, supposed to be a non-retail rate. That's where they're obtaining these and not marking up correctly. Throughout COVID, none of that travel happened. So a lot of that was closed off, shut down, and we actually ended up with pretty close to being 100% in parity because we just didn't have those channels open. Obviously, we do need those channels, and with international travel resuming, and we want to build that business back up again. But controlling where they're opened and how, so that you don't start to lose control of those rates again. It allowed us to really pinpoint where all the issues were happening, and to make sure when we're opening those things again that we're controlling where and how we open them and who they're distributed to.
And I guess if you look at communicating that product value message to the market, if they're looking for that product at that same point in time, you know, if you're in parity, it's sending a clear market message that that's the product value for your offer at that point in time. But another analogy, if I can just share with the audience, sometimes it's to think about also if you engage a real estate agent to sell your house, it's, you know, if you're going to put a sign up in your front window with your mobile to say, call me direct and I'll do it less for you, then you're not really motivating the seller, and they're likely to spend their energies on the house across the road. Does that make sense to you? Sometimes that's a good way to maybe help people just grasp the concept, but I'm not saying that there's not a place for it. I'm just saying that you have to appreciate the model, and everybody wants the customer, and then look at obviously the best ways for your property and where you can generate, where you're getting most of your business from, as to where you need to target your strategy.
Yeah, because it's not always about the best rate. There are other ways to drive volumes through online travel agents that don't require you to give a better than market rate. And there's some really cool ways to do that, you know, where you can measure your ROI very clearly, whether it's, you know, Booking.com's just launched here network sponsored ads, which is what Expedia have had in market for a little while. And the reporting's really good. You can see very efficiently where your dollars are going and the value of the spend. There's a lot more control, as opposed to just arbitrarily giving a genius booker a discount because they're a genius because they've made one booking via Booking.com. They're not a genius, they're just opportunistic, that's all. So, you know, it's how you spend that money and what sacrifices you're prepared to make. And do you actually have to make that sacrifice?
Great. And you did touch on, because I was going to say, when we go through a time of desperation, then people find opportunities within that. So I was going to ask if you have been noticing more rogue sites popping up that are scraping your rates, and everyone's trying to, you know, find opportunity in that space too. And industry may have their eye off the ball a little bit because we have seen a surge in 2022, but also there's the staffing shortages. So maybe a lot of operators are, you know, happy to take what they can get, but we could create other issues down the track if we're not monitoring, you know, these opportunistic sites. So I don't know if you've noticed anything in particular, or...
I think there's a few new names popping up here and there, and you sort of, you know, see it in the parity shop and go, oh, I haven't seen that one before, and then you start to see it across other hotels and things. I think you also need, I mean, you want to control it as much as you can, but in terms of an ROI of that time spent on trying to monitor that one
Yes.
Rogue third party that, you know, people won't have trust in as booking because it's popped up out of nowhere. You may get one or two bookings coming up here and there from it. How much is it actually costing me, as opposed to the time and effort I'm putting in? And can I quickly and easily shut down what that issue is, or, you know, is it going to take a lot longer to troubleshoot it? So you've got to weigh up all these different things. Yes, with it.
Absolutely.
I think it's also important, we are seeing some of the main players, whether it's Booking.com, Expedia, Agoda, they're going into the Meta side as well. So they're selling through Meta, but at the same time, there are also other rogue OTAs, if you may call it, selling through Meta, you know, X Hotels, Zuzu. You've got, obviously, Agoda has the different areas where they'll kind of sell through Meta. When Australia sleeps, that's the time when they open up and they do those parity secrets, but quite a few, like Kristy said, there are quite a few that keep mushrooming in, and like the Amomas of the world, they then die off as well.
And Anthony, your distribution power saw Choice, grow in their franchising opportunities. Would that be correct? I saw something around about February of this year saying just the power of your distribution network, and also you've implemented a new RM program as well, which you really saw, can attest to the value of RM because you saw some great growth in Q3, I think, of last year. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, revenue management, and everyone does it these days, but for us, we've been doing it for 5 years, but it's just been such a game changer for us because a lot of our franchisees, just to give you all background, not dissimilar to the BW footprint, 60% regional, 40% metro, but, the average property size for us is around 55 rooms, so we're talking a lot of ma and pa operators. And no disrespect to them at all. They're really good at providing great customer service and a great place to stay. But RM's a discipline. It's a bit of a science too. They don't have the wherewithal. They certainly don't have the time because of all the staffing challenges that they face to focus on changing their rates and managing distribution and, completing RFPs all the time. So that's been hugely beneficial. Our RM properties, of which, 3/4 of our portfolio of 160 odd in Australia and New Zealand are on the program, outperform the market, and they outperform our non-revenue managed properties to the tune of about 12% when we look at RevPAR. So it has been an absolute driver of performance, but it has additional benefits. As a franchise, we're only as good as our numbers and the product that we offer. It helps with retention as well, and it also helps coordinate efforts with the sales team, keeps the marketing people honest who want to put yet another discount out there, and we sort of say, no, not now, no midweek discounts, save them for the weekends because they're softening. It's really good to have that, I don't know if conflict is the right word, but to have those robust discussions between your sales and marketing team and your revenue managers. Never should they live in the same house because it's not good for them to get cosy. We've got to keep each other honest. But yeah, it's been a real performance, like massive uplift in performance as a result.
Excellent. All right, now just shifting our focus slightly, there's a lot of pressure obviously with rising costs. We want to keep rates up. Obviously, when we've got good demand, we want to have our pricing high as well. But to keep profitability, the pressure, there's a lot of pressure on rates. With the softening that we're, experiencing a little bit compared to last year, have you found you're revisiting any of your promotional rates or programs, things that you may have closed out that you might be looking to reopen again? What would be your take on that?
Yeah, so touching back onto what I said in terms of the wholesale pricing and things like that, obviously when international borders were closed, all that was shut down. So now that, and really last year was such a high demand period, and there wasn't a huge amount of international travel. We had most of our discount structure closed off, and we're just really driving rates and making a lot of revenue for the hotels, which was fantastic. Now things are stabilising, so we need to revisit what's going on. So yeah, we are looking down minimum length of stay, advanced purchase, all those different tactics that you put in place at different times for different hotels, and just making sure that that is set up for this different seasonality now that we're seeing moving forward.
A question came up at the summit that we had recently about how can revenue managers be confident with the pressure on rate to keep it high with this softening that you're sort of seeing now, obviously data and forecasts and trends, but you might want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, rate growth is great, but you also need to make sure that it's sustainable and there is a balance between quality and value, because ultimately you don't want to be short-lived and have an impact on your guest reviews and your long-term sustainability as well. So that's number one. Number two, what we've also observed, from the data insights that we had, is that there was, as hoteliers, we are always used to either a flexible rate or a non-refundable rate, which is highly restrictive, prepay. There was the emergence of the semi-flex rate that came over COVID, and the semi-flex rate is where the the revenue is able to have some confidence in the product that they're selling, have some fencing to an extent that, okay, you can cancel within 3 days or 5 days, and then there will be penalties. But to Kristy's point, as we're seeing the markets now getting more established, the customer getting more confident of the travel without those restrictions, the semi-flex rate is slowly dropping, the percentage of that. So for instance, non-refundable rate from last year, there were about 9.5 to 10% of the hotels in Sydney that were offering non-refundable rates. That has increased to 26% of the hotels now offer non-refundable rates. And consequently, the percentage of hotels that offer semi-flex rates have dropped from 31 to 16% now. So it's still there, but it's slowly weaning off. The other thing that we've also noticed is the difference in the cancellation policy. So, you wanted people to come in, feel as flexible as possible, where they could cancel last minute because of restrictions or lockdowns. But now the hoteliers are definitely very confident in controlling their constrained nights, specifically the event nights, their weekend stays. So the cancellation policies are getting a little bit more entrenched in their revenue strategy as well. Sydney, for instance, we've always had a one-night length. We've always had a one-day cancellation policy. But now it's becoming a little bit more stringent, where just about 4.5% of the hotels will actually offer something which is a best flex, where you can cancel on the day, but otherwise they will be very restrictive on that. So yeah, those are the two things.
It did obviously go to flexible just about everything, and then it's been able to rein that back in where you can as well, and revisit and relook at those sorts of things. Absolutely. Also, what about, I wanted to ask about with the brands that it's been mentioned earlier on, from a revenue manager's standpoint, are we good at creating brands or, optimising brands, and how challenging is that with the explosion of different brands for you to manage across, your multi-portfolios of different groups? I mean, obviously, from an owner's standpoint, I'm sure that they need that unique proposition statement in the market and that point of difference. But do you have any insights or challenges from an RM perspective?
Sure. Look, I think it's definitely about telling that property's brand story. So, you need to work with the marketing team and be leveraging that actual brand story for that hotel. And how it differs, how it complements any other properties that you have in the same region that may be other brands. So you have that differentiation piece. I don't think that necessarily it leads to pricing issues, because regardless of the hotel, regardless of the brand, I'm going to get the best rates that I possibly can at any given time. So that's unique to that hotel. Differentiating the brands, I mean, they're ours, and I'm sure the other big chains, they're created because they're seeing a need in the market for that specific segment. So they're created because we've got a gap. Yes. And so they're attracting a unique customer base, segment base. Yeah, there's some overlaps between the two, but your core is something that's unique and is drawn to that property for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, look, I think there's a perception from the consumer that knowing our brands, they would pay a different price for another. But at the end of the day, the disciplines of RM cross all brands, and that's, and they hold sway over anything else. The brand doesn't really come into it. It probably just determines the comp set, which is part of your RM strategy, but that's about the...
I think just one thing from my perspective is, we're seeing a lot of those brands, the plethora coming in, and we discussed this in the summit as well. In fact, you've got some of the global companies who have brands, almost about 30 to 40, some of them. As long as there's no cannibalization of segments and pricing, and there's no price gouging between the brands, I think then you can maintain the standards, and you can really clearly attract the right segment of the customer to your hotel. I think that's really critical. So as RMs, I think that's really important for the RM discipline to maintain that.
But just also add that if you are telling the right story of the brand and that hotel, then you're creating that customer expectation in terms of what they're going to receive from the brand, from the hotel. And then you can monitor that in relation to your pricing through, value for price paid statistics, through, Medallia or guest reviews, etc. So you can see in terms of your pricing that whether you are structuring that right based on the actual brand property experience.
Very good. I just heard the bell, but I did want to ask also, let's move to the next 6 months, your outlook. How confident are you now with, the budget process and your forecasts and things, and what red flags, do you perhaps think we need to keep on our horizon?
I probably thought there were more red flags before I heard Adele this morning. I really feel good about domestic tourism and that being relatively stable. I mean, GDS for us is up. I mean, again, that probably has a lot to do with our regional skew. That's compared to last year, but compared to 2019. So that is encouraging, but felt that this period, May through September, our autumn and winter was going to be pretty telling as far as the year was going to go, because I think we all in the room felt like Q1 was amazing. April, a little bit of a softening. So I'm very curious to see what our May numbers look like, because I think that might be a bit of a tell-all for the 5 months that come after that, with an anticipation that Q4 will be very strong again.
Yeah, I think with the forecasting, the market's definitely stabilising, and I think it's stabilising in terms of occupancy and average rate really to 2022. Yeah, there are some variances. April was one of them, but it was such a high last year that that would have been difficult to outpace by a long way. But in terms of the gains that we've made on 2019 and the rate increases that we've been able to get and hopefully maintain, and I think that a lot of hotels and hoteliers will be very focused on keeping those prices where they are now and only growing rather than dropping them down again because of the increased cost. So I think that the future's looking good. It's quite stable. I think we can rely on sort of normal forecasting practices, but we need to be ready to adapt very quickly.
Yes, definitely.
I think 3 things for me. One, as Adele and Matt mentioned this morning, there is normalization. I would say recalibration of pricing. We definitely will not see the surge of price points that we saw in 2022. There will be normalization coming in towards Q3, Q4. The good thing is that flight frequencies are increasing, so flight searches are on the rise, which is really positive for us down under. It is definitely, our source markets are changing, so China has opened up, and China, I know in the morning, Patricia spoke about the 18 to 24 months, but China is so strong and so buoyant that our data suggests that, people can start to travel within 2 weeks. So we just, they are there, they will start, we need to prepare for it. And the final thing that I'm also seeing is that Airbnb and Vrbo, the alternate accommodation and the short-term listings are getting really entrenched in our accommodation space. So we need to look at them as an emerging competitor. So we need to factor them into our pricing strategy, because they might just be kind of pulling up some segment dilution into their areas as well. So I think we need to be aware of that.
Good. And we'll close on this last point. So perhaps if each of you have just one key thing that our delegates, when they leave the conference today, they perhaps should go back and prioritise up the top as a focus. There's a lot of things that should be up there, obviously. But if you have one key thing each to share, to encourage them to go back and look at.
Can I just say I'm not anti-OTA. They are a very critical business partner of ours, but just make sure that what you're doing on those platforms is serving you well. Really determine what your ROI is and ask yourself, against my comp set, do I need to be doing what I need to be doing what I am doing, and is that really paying the dividends that I expected it would, or am I just putting money somewhere that I don't actually need to? That would be the biggest thing for me, because it can be quite striking when you step back and have a look at that as to how things are actually performing for you or your group of hotels.
Excellent.
I think for me it would be making sure everybody in your business is across the big picture in terms of what your goals and strategies are as a business. So whether you're an independent hotel, whether you're working for a bigger group, corporate level or at the hotel level, that everybody knows what the goals are, what you are putting in process to achieve the goals, and that they're all part of that team effort to achieve them.
I think from my side, the revenue vertical is really critical more now than ever. Revenue managers are wearing multiple hats, so they're pretty much your commercial lead on the property. So use them, and more importantly, equip them with the right data sets. Because if you can base your executive decision, which will always have an impact on your bottom line, on the right data and how you're utilizing the data to make those justified decisions, then I think we've got the decision, and we've definitely added to the bottom line there.
Wonderful. We'll close on that, but everybody please thank my panel and for the insights that they shared. Thank you guys. Thanks very much.